welcome back to the All Things podcast. I'm back with another Christian Takeover where This is my husband, where he's gonna ask some questions. This one is a topic that my best friend suggested we do, which I think is funny. She suggested that we do a podcast on sacrifice and what we learned about sacrifice in 2024. And I feel like to talk about this, we're going to have to go back, way back to even before we met and what sacrifice looked like when we started dating. Because I feel like we didn't have a lot of people around us walking through the same thing and having to sacrifice in the way that we did. And it's like some of these things are things I wish somebody would have told me back then, that somebody near me would have been able to like speak into it. That came later on. But not right away. So.
Well, that also speaks to this whole idea of a calling, like there's a lot of jobs, there's a lot of things you can do, but then there's a call from God, right? And sometimes they line up and sometimes they're the same, but a call from God often is your path, right? It's the path that is like designed for you and you're supposed to walk down it. And, it could look like something great. It doesn't have to be terrible.
Your current assignment too is what you could call it.
Yeah. So like sometimes it's hard to find mentors like what you were saying, or people who've walked down the same thing that you have. Yeah. But it's really because they don't have the same calling as you. Like you have a really unique life. You're a very unique person. And that goes not just for Mallory. It goes for all of you watching. Like your life, your calling is very unique. So keep that in mind when you're taking advice and when.
Yeah. There's also a difference between calling and assignment, but we'll get to that on another one.
Yeah. Because
your calling is from when you're born to when you die. Your assignment is whatever's right in front of you.
Right.
In that moment. So.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yes.
We'll do that. We'll talk about that another time, I guess.
That's a good topic. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's the Christian Takeover. So.
Okay. First question. Yeah. Let's go down the list. All right. What are the ways you sacrificed this past year? She's like, where do I start? She's like, I have like a list of 10 million things.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I would say to start, small things were like, if we're going like on a scale of like small to really big things, some small things were hills I chose to die on and not die on for wedding planning. Because there were some things that I was like really like set on, and there's some things that certain family members really wanted. And so there were a lot of moments during wedding planning where I was like, okay, this part's not eternal. It's fine. It's fine. So I would say that. I would also say, well, obviously, like moving to New York was really hard. Like leaving my girlfriends behind, because really like he needs guys and I need girls. Like that's the church. We need the church, and they were my church, really. Those girls were my church. And so, leaving them was really hard. And with coming, I also knew that I wasn't going to be doing worship leading. And for anybody who knew before, I went to Liberty University for worship leadership. And so my family was in like so much support of that, because there's really high demand for worship leaders. Everybody's looking for one. And so I never saw it to be a problem with like getting jobs or anything like that. And I knew that I had a couple options for when I graduated. And then I met him, and long story short, if I was to marry him, I knew I had to go to New York for the time being. And so with that came going to a church that won't pay us, that can't pay us. So I knew that I had to find another job. And that was really hard because going through school, I had this idea of what I was going to be doing right after college. The vocation I was going to be in, like my heart has always been pulled towards full-time ministry. I grew up in a full-time ministry family, and I like loved it. It was like my favorite part of my life growing up. I just ran to church. I always wanted to be there. And I watched my parents model it really well. And I watched my dad model it in a way that I never resented him being in ministry. I just like actually longed to do it myself. And so I know that I'm like wired for full-time ministry. So sacrifices it's looked like time for sure. It's looked like sacrificing a lot of time.
I think a lot of those lessons people learn very gradually. I feel like you've had to learn like within a span of like a year and a half or like 2 years, probably these past 2 years. And like moving to New York was extremely hard for you. And like I was firsthand witness of you learning and growing in that being like an example of biblical sacrifice and knowing how to sacrifice in your relationship with God. Just to encourage people listening, like if your relationship with God is not costing you anything, right? You have to like think about it, like what is this costing me? Because when you look at the teachings of Jesus said, pick up your cross and follow me.
And it doesn't mean necessarily for you, maybe like, forsaking a vocation you want to do or things like that. It could just mean like passions, like passions in the sinful sense, like the worldly sense. Like he asks you, like if you have, for example, like if you are inclined to like a homosexual desire, he's going to ask you to lay that down and to pick up your cross of righteousness and follow him.
Right. Sometimes it's sin. Sometimes it's very blaringly obvious sin. He's clearly telling you to sacrifice that. But other things are not so clear. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about it's your life. Your life is very unique. Your life is very designed. And, Christ will call you to sacrifice things that maybe he's not going to call for other people, right? And this, I think there's definitely something there. What I was saying before about Jesus saying, hey, pick up your cross and follow me. It's important to remember that back then, we've kind of glorified the cross, the picture of the cross. The cross was an instrument of torture. It was an instrument of execution, I feel like the closest thing to the cross in our day would be like an electric chair, if you will, or something like some type of torturing device.
No, so that's not allowed now.
So what Jesus was saying, he was like, hey, sit in your electric chair. Like, I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know.
Sit in your I
could be going a little too far, but I think it's important to realize actually what Jesus was saying. He's saying, hey, pick up your cross and follow me. Follow you where?
Essentially, well, and Paul talks too about like the thorn in his side.
Right. Yeah.
Too. And like how the Lord has not removed it from him, even though he's asked many times.
Right.
But he still went on to go serve.
Yeah. And this isn't to make us be mopey Christians that just walk around thinking life is all about pain and suffering and sacrifice. And that's totally not true. But I think it's a message that needs to be highlighted, like what Mallory was saying earlier, in our society, the way it is, the way we like. I don't know if you mentioned that. Definitely before we started recording. But this whole idea where people are all about self-gratification, and it's all about what's going to benefit me in the moment and what's going to benefit me the next 5 years, not the next like 40 years, not my children's years. So. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the thing too is like I watched my parents do this. Like I had an example of it in two different ways. One, my parents are in their like mid 50s with a 10-year-old right now. And they took in a 4 or 5 and 6-year-old when they were like early 50s. And they knew with that meant like kissing early retirement goodbye, being able to travel wherever they want, really put their money wherever they wanted, you know, just deciding to go travel the world like their coworkers do. And I see them laying themselves down for my siblings, and they did for me like every day. Like my mom messaged me this morning and she's spending all day watching my siblings' sports games. And that is sacrifice, and I've watched them do it for years and years and years. And then I also watched my mom move from Canada to the US, beautiful area of Canada, to the US, to like the Midwest, to be a youth pastor's wife to my dad. And on like really low income at the time. Back then youth pastors got paid like nothing. They still get paid nothing, but like really nothing. And I watched her do it without complaint for years. And so I had that example of sacrifice, you know, to kind of base my idea of sacrifice off of. But around me, as far as like friends of mine, I hadn't seen like an example of it in like a beginning of a relationship. That was a really hard thing to have to figure out.
Yeah, it's something usually you warm up to.
Yeah.
It was so clear that I needed to go back to New York and be with my family, help the church that we're serving at here. And I think like when my dad passed, it was like so obvious where I was supposed to be. And we were just getting to know each other. We were literally like
2 months in.
2 months in, yeah. I mean, we've had some serious from the beginning, we had serious conversations.
Go watch the
whole time.
The story time.
There was no like friendship phase. We were never
just friends.
It was just always like, because the second I felt feelings and she felt the same way. The second she felt feelings, we got to it and we just talked about it, and we talked about all the scenarios, what we didn't like in each other, what could have, what would potentially be a problem down the road, and
concerns stuff like that. We had.
Yeah, yes, concerns we had, and so like that kind of just like set the tone for the relationship.
Yeah, and it was essentially like
so
he always laughs, but it was essentially, you want to marry me, you're coming to New York.
That's not what I said.
But it translated.
But ultimately it kind of was that.
Exactly.
But I mean I never actually said that explicitly, but yeah.
Yeah. And so I immediately like had to decide, okay, like I see what I have in him. Do I want that enough to forsake all my other plans, essentially?
Yeah.
And I did.
Here you are.
Yay.
New York.
Okay. You have another question?
Cool. Wow. Question 1. All right. Question 2. Where, let me skip that one. Let's go to the third one. What's one thing you need to remember when sacrificing for people?
Okay. Well, number 1.
Because I before you say it, I feel like a lot of our conversation was sacrificing for God. Like that first question was a lot of like sacrificing for the Lord and your relationship with the Lord, which makes sense to a lot of our brains, and we can kind of like wrap our head around that and be like okay with that. Mm-hmm. But sacrificing for people is sometimes a little more tough. And what do you need to remember?
I would say you have to remember the way that Christ sacrificed for you. Like the way that like he gave himself for you, and he also has not asked you to do anything that he's unfamiliar with. Right. Like he's not asking you to sacrifice unfamiliar with it himself. Mm-hmm. Like the word talks about how he's acquainted with grief, and he's fully acquainted with all of that. So when you realize that was done for you, it makes it easier to extend it to other people.
Yeah.
I would say it has to be done in humility. If you're doing it to hold it over somebody's head, it's not valuable. If you're doing it out of a sense of pride or you owe me now. You have to do it from an understanding that like this is just the call This is the call of God on our lives towards people, you know, to like, you know, in a sense there's sacrifice in evangelism, in like sacrifice in like your, how people view you, XYZ, your comfort, you know, but the Lord says, go and make disciples. I would say that, you should never sacrifice to the point of forsaking a higher calling. Like never sacrifice a higher calling, like never sacrifice anything that would hurt your walk with Christ, would hurt your integrity, that would compromise your integrity.
That's good.
Yeah. Do you have thoughts?
Yeah. There's so many different ways, things you could say about like what to keep in mind when you're sacrificing for imperfect people. And like, just the first thing that comes to my mind is where Jesus is like, what you do to the least of these, you've done to me, you know, and they'll be like, you know, Lord, when did we not give you bread when you were hungry? When did we not clothe you when you were naked or whatever? And he said, you know, surely, surely I say to you, whatever you did to the least of these, you've also done to me. So like, that's what I would keep in mind. Like Jesus has called you not to serve people as much as he's called you to serve him. So when you're serving people, you're actually serving him, right? Mm-hmm. When you're forgiving someone, you're actually like, you're not forgiving Jesus, but you know, you're doing it because you know that you were forgiven and you love Jesus. It's still pointing to Jesus, still pointing to him and your relationship with him. So I think when you're sacrificing for people, you just have to realize that you're actually sacrificing for the Lord, right? Like it's not about the person. And that's what I would say.
But, it's also like the ultimate act of like love too. Yeah. Because if you were in a relationship and they never sacrificed for you, would you like, what would you think of how much they loved you? You know? Right. We know an individual who like really never had to like endure any kind of like suffering or sacrifice, which like, that's great for their life. You know, that's good. We don't want, you know, obviously suffering, but it says something about the way you love people. It like how much do you love me? Like how much are you well, you know, it says that there's no greater love than this, like that a friend would lay his life down for another. There's no greater love. Yep.
Yeah, I mean that opens up the whole topic of love is sacrifice, right? I mean, Jesus was a sacrifice for us. He gave his blood as a ransom for many, and Jesus is our example of love, right? And like, so love is sacrifice. Love is Jesus. Jesus embodies the sacrifice. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's true. I mean, keep that in mind. Like when you're sacrificing for people, you're developing a part of you, a part of your character that you wouldn't have had otherwise. It's true that we know a few people that have just never had to sacrifice or never had to sacrifice in their life. And it shows. It shows in the way that they love, like Christian said.
Yeah, it shows in the way they love people.
It shows in the way that they hold on or not hold on to relationships. Mm-hmm. It's to me, love really only means something unless it's tested, unless it's put through the fire.
Unless it costs you. Yeah. Yep. Well, yeah, I think that's why there's no greater love than one laying down their life for another. There's no greater love than the sacrificing of all of you. Right. For somebody, you know, and that was what made us really understand that we were meant for each other pretty much right away, was like what sacrifice we'd seen in each other towards other people or towards each other, what we were willing to do for each other pretty much right away. We were like, okay, yeah, cool.
Yep. Should we move on? Next question. Okay. What role has sacrifice played in marriage? Well, we kind of like talked about that a lot.
Okay, well, I will say something and then you from the husband's perspective.
Okay, yeah.
And, well, number one, like you're one, you're one. You have to think as one, operate as one. It's not his life and my life. It's not him and his family and me and my family. Our families are now extended family. We are a family now, you know? And again, like, love is really proved through sacrifice. And we saw it with our parents' marriages, the way that, like, our moms would sacrifice for our dads and vice versa. Mm-hmm. And that was really what displayed a lot of their love for each other, you know, in front of us. And really, like, I had to learn really quickly, like, and ask myself what I was willing to sacrifice, because, you know, if I knew I wanted to marry him, I was like, okay, like, does he mean more to me than a job? Does he mean more to me than my friends? Does he mean more to me than, you know, XYZ? And it's something that, like, we can hold on to, the vows that we made to each other of what we were willing to do, that, like, we were willing to sacrifice for each other. I really do think that it displays your heart. It displays reason to trust one another too, of like, I can trust you because I've seen you give this for me. You know, I've seen you give XYZ. I've seen you lay XYZ down. And so as a wife, it looks completely different, because the call of God on a wife is to submit. It's to, and that we'll have a whole other separate thing on that, because people hate that word. Everyone hates that word.
Submit. It's a trigger word.
But it's essentially like trusting, like what he said in his vows was, trust the God in me. And that's exactly what it means. That's fully what it means. It's trusting enough that he has God in him, and he has the Holy Spirit, and he has an ear for the Lord to stand back and allow him to make decisions informed by the Holy Spirit for our marriage, and for our life. And so if he has a call in his life that he believes that he has to do, then it's my job to say, okay, I trust that is actually what you're hearing from God, and I'm going to help you, and I'm going to stand back and be here helping you. Which I think we could have an entire one on just like marriage and that dynamic. Yeah. You know, because I don't want to rabbit trail. I was about to rabbit trail, but I'm not gonna.
That's funny.
Women can do it and then pull right back in, but I don't think we could.
Yeah, no. So from the husband's perspective, let me just start by saying, you know, we don't know everything about marriage. We did just get married under a year ago still. So I
can't wait to redo this in like 5 years.
Yeah. So clearly we still have a lot to learn. A whole lot. Like
the only reason we're talking about this is because so much hardship and sacrifice has happened for us in the last year and a half. That we got to talk about it while it's fresh.
Yeah. Yes.
But I think
that is why we're doing this. Yeah.
It's going to be very vivid in our minds for a while, but like so much has happened right away. Because a lot of times people will talk about their marriage of like, oh yeah, this is what I learned in 20 years. I feel like so much of what has happened for us in 2 years of being together has like doesn't happen for a lot of people in the span of 15 years. Would you say?
Yeah.
That's not like cocky or whatever. I mean, we don't wish it upon anybody, but it's just the reality. There's been a lot, like so much was thrown at us right away, which is why we're speaking on it. So
we still don't even
test it against the word.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah. So just wanted to preface with that though, is that we're still young and we still have a lot to learn about marriage. So we're just talking about from our experiences.
From his old age of 25.
25. Yeah.
Halfway to 50.
She loves to like say that I'm old, and I'm really not old. I'm still young. Okay. I mean, when it comes to sacrificing as a husband, like, I would just immediately run to that verse that Paul talks about.
Peter. First
Thank
Peter
you.
3.
Yes. You know, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. And that's a command. That's a clear path for us. So like if you're lost, if you're like, okay, how do I be a husband? It's right there. Be Jesus, which is what it sounds like. And like I think a lot of guys maybe will hear that and don't know how to relate to that. I mean, like obviously they understand it, but here's a real simple, easy path to understand that. You don't need to be Jesus for this woman that God has entrusted you with. You need to learn how to sacrifice for that woman. You need to learn.
Because the rest of the verse says,
yeah,
he laid it, like he laid his life down.
right. Yeah, where he laid his life for the church, right? And the same way Jesus takes care of his church, in the same way that he laid his life down for the church, you need to take care of your bride, and you need to take sacrifice for your bride. Lay down your life for your bride. And I think that's something that you need to walk out every single day. I've learned, and that it's not something that you can just say in one moment and just think in one moment and then it'll be fine. It's something that you have to do every single day. I think.
So what does learning that look like for you?
I think learning how to sacrifice for you, that's right, and like in the best way I can, I think has been learning to prioritize and just get to know the personhood of Jesus in the best way I can, right? Because if I'm supposed to act like Jesus and sacrifice my life and sacrifice who I am for you, and why not just be with him all the time? And why not just communicate and pursue a relationship with him so that I become more and more like him? Because you are who you hang out with. I think everyone knows that. So I think Jesus is kind of like the perfect husband for the church in that analogy, right? And so I'd rather just hang out with Jesus and become the best husband that I can, I think that's the best way to do it. Or that's the way I've done it. I've learned how to sacrifice for you. And I think as a dude or as a man, it's easy to get really caught up in our aspirations and our goals. I think guys are really goal driven, and we have a lot of things that we want to do. And I think it's a God-given.
It's the instinct of pursuit.
Yeah, it's the instinct of pursuit. That's a good way to put it. And I think that can sometimes go against this whole idea of sacrifice and this whole idea of laying your life down for your wife. And you have to remember that your life is not, it never was, but it's certainly now not about you. Completely not about you anymore. Especially when you get married. Your life is about her now. It's about sacrificing for her, and making sure that I think she's prioritized almost in every way. That's another way you can sacrifice for your wife, and that's something I'm not perfect at. And honestly, I don't think any husband is perfect at it. Jesus was the only perfect husband for the church. So, like I said earlier, you're not supposed to be Jesus literally, because then I think sometimes you can put unrealistic expectations on yourself. But I think you're supposed to strive and be the most sacrificial person that you can. So understand that your goal-driven career and your life now is second, right? Before it was everything, but now there's this other thing, and it's called your family. It's called your wife, and they now take priority over that, whatever it is. I think for artists who are creative or musicians, I could see why that could be a struggle for them, or because let's say you're a creative person and you have this artistry that you have, like I did in a lot of ways. I still release music. Sort of. I haven't released a song in forever, but it takes a lot to put yourself out there and to put your ideas out there. And it's kind of like this idea of like a Lone Ranger just making this idea happen. And people who are really creative will have that in them, that ability to just completely be like, I need to make this idea happen. And like, they're very goal driven, but that whole side of you now has to come second, and that whole like drive to even provide, has to come second to your wife, to loving your family. Yeah, those are just some things that I've learned from the limited, years that I've been married, which is months. Yeah. Okay. So it's even better. I can already see this being a thing, and it's something that I'm still learning. I'm something I'm still like walking out every single day and learning how to do as best as I can. But yeah, it looks like an every single day thing, I think, for guys. In marriage, sacrifice in marriage. It looks like every single day you are prioritizing your wife, you're prioritizing your family, and yeah, it's no longer about you anymore.
Yeah, family, but this is what he means by family.
Yeah.
We're still married. He just left his ring.
Oh, I don't. Oh man, I forgot to grab it. So it's funny. I had the rubber ring on because she bought me these rubber rings, but I left. She was like, "Put on the gold one," and I was like, "Okay," and I took it off, and then I ran and I forgot to put on the gold one.
We're still married.
Yep, I am married. Yep.
Next one.
Okay.
The sun is setting.
It is. Okay. Question number 5. How can one learn to sacrifice in a biblical way? Or what does sacrificing in a biblical way look like?
Well, I was reading in Genesis about Abraham and his son. And like, I feel like people kind of jump to that one for like examples of sacrifice, but really like what the Lord wanted from Abraham was his yes, was his like surrender. So a lot of times that's what the Lord is asking you to do. He's like, do I have your heart? Do I have your allegiance? Do I do I have lordship over your life? If you're like, what are you willing to give up? Because anything you're not willing to sacrifice is an idol, anything you're not willing to give up. And so, I always think of it that way of like, in the midst of sacrifice, the Lord is saying, do I have your yes? Do I have lordship in your life? And then Paul goes on to talk in Romans, like to present your bodies as a living sacrifice. And what that looks like is dying to yourself, is like putting to death the flesh and all of the worldly desires and passions that we are born with. That alone is sacrifice. Yeah. Like sacrificing things that you have an inclination to want. That's why fasting is so fruitful, because you are putting to death the flesh, sacrificing with the flesh desires to hear the Lord. And so so much sacrifice is like always about the heart with the Lord. It's always him asking if he has your Lord, like if he has lordship over your life. And also like, sacrifice in itself can produce hardship and produce suffering, and it's not comfortable. But what Peter, James, all of them talk about, though now for a little while you've been grieved by various trials, so that at the coming of Christ it will result in praise and glory and honor. And it's also, I think it aids too. It aids too in your sanctification. Like Philippians, like he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. He's gonna use sacrifice to do that. He's gonna use sacrifice to sanctify you. Nothing that he asks you to sacrifice will return void and will be wasted. Right.
Yeah. Those are all really good points. What comes to my mind is when we're thinking about sacrificing in a biblical way, one of the examples that comes to my mind is with King Saul and the prophet Samuel. And Samuel tells him, he's like, listen, you know, obedience is better than sacrifice. Does the Lord not delight in obedience more than burnt offerings? And, that's something that you have to keep in mind, that when you're sacrificing biblically, you need to obey. There needs to be obedience involved. And that's something that takes a lot of maturity to understand. And I think the longer you're in your relationship with God, you'll realize that it's all about obedience. Mm-hmm. God desires obedience, right? Like, you can't just say you're a Christian and not do anything about it. That whole idea of showing the fruits of the Spirit, mm-hmm. and that being evidence, right? Fruits of the Spirit being you're walking in obedience in a way where you're walking and acting like Christ was. Christ does, and you're not acting like the world, and you're different, right? There's like a follow-up. There's like the thought, oh yeah, like I need to be a better person. And then you actually have to be a better person. Yeah. Right? And then so like it's not enough just to actually sacrifice something. And that's where the maturity comes in your relationship with God. Sometimes you'll do things for God and you'll sacrifice for God and you'll feel like God doesn't even care or is not there. Or you feel like God, like I'm doing all this stuff for you and this is still happening, right? Or I still feel this way, XYZ, whatever it is. Well, are you obeying God? Are you following him in obedience, right? What's your number one calling? To go and make disciples across all nations, all the earth. Are you making disciples, right? Are you fulfilling the Great Commission? Mm-hmm. Are you fulfilling your number one ministry, which is ministry to him, which is ministry to his heart? Are you doing that? Are you ministering to God's heart? Are you asking God how he's doing today?
Yeah, go down the tier of like what he asks you to do first.
Yeah.
Like
so that's what I would keep in mind. When you encounter relationships, when you are walking through life, you're going to have to sacrifice. And you have to remember that sacrifice doesn't get you brownie points, right? Like if anything gets you brownie points, it's obedience, right? So that's what I would keep in mind. It's all about obedience over sacrifice.
Yeah. This is what I was thinking of in Micah. It says, shall I come before him with burnt offerings? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression? Talking about offerings. And then it says, what does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God?
Yeah.
So,
amen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of Jesus when he said, when they asked him, like, what's the most important commandment? To love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength. And he said the second is like it, to love others as you love yourself.
Yeah. Yep. But I think another thing to remember too is that like you're not in the will of God when it's hard. Like you are often in the will of God when it's hard. And I feel like this is where I struggled when we were engaged, because no one around me had this example. Like friends of mine had gotten married and it was like La La Land. Like they were like, oh, I'm buying a house. Oh, I'm starting this job. And oh, I'm doing this. And oh, I'm doing that. And this is so great. And I was like, I'm getting ready to be married and I'm like picking up my entire life. Well, no, leaving my entire life behind to start a new one. And I was like, what on earth? This is crazy. But really, like, God will ask you to sacrifice. And, and I really had to go find people who had sacrificed like that before, like my mom. I really had to go and find people and ask them, like, what did you do? Like, how did you get through it? How did you pray through it? But so much of it was praying and asking the Lord to show himself amidst it, like to show himself that he was still there, still walking with me, even though he was asking that of me. But I also think that, like, don't despise it. Don't despise when he asks you to sacrifice, because, as displayed on the cross, it proves a love that outlasts all other kinds of love, when we got married, you know, when I chose to come and chose to, you know, start over, in that I was saying, I love you more than these other things, you know?
Right.
And honestly, it's going to prove fruitful so much further down the line. The fact that so much of this, I guess you could call sanctification, so much of it happened so early on for us, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And you had said that you had only known sacrifice to not be like, remember how you said that it was like only giving, no receiving in previous relationships?
Yeah, in past relationships it was yeah, my
We won't
mom
go
and
on
dad
too much of a rabbit trail.
Yeah, well, like my mom and dad growing up, it was all about sacrifice, and my mom and dad loved me well. They loved me so much. My mom kisses me to this day all the time. She smothers me and kisses.
She does.
But yeah, one of the things that I loved that they installed in my heart was this concept of sacrifice, of life not being about you, learning how to put others before yourself. Something that I've always known was the case. And when I was dating in high school, which is,
High school and college.
Yeah, high school and college. I guess a lot of other people didn't have that yet. That whole concept. It was still very lovey-dovey for a lot of people. So, like, with that stark contrast of like love is sacrifice completely to like, experiencing love only as like this lovey-dovey thing, and seeing that in other people, it was like I just like didn't learn how to have a blend of the two sometimes, and in some of my past relationships it was all about sacrifice, and that's all it ever was. And yeah, because I knew what, in my mind, I felt like it was more important. But, obviously, like, tenderness is very important too. And that's something that I've learned, which my mom has modeled for me all my life. Yeah.
Sometimes it takes walking through it to learn it.
Yeah.
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 Yep.
Okay, so we have one more question. Okay.
We've got our notes.
Okay, so I'm going to reword this question because the wording wasn't right. We were talking about this earlier. So with this question, it's, when do I know when to stop sacrificing? When is sacrificing not good?
Yeah. And we were talking about this like a little bit earlier, but you have like your, I'm going to not say calling, I'm going to say assignments, because calling is like a really broad thing. His is to create, mine is to encourage. That is from birth till death. I'm designed to encourage. That is my calling. My calling is not like a specific assignment. Right now we have an assignment. And we are each other's also till death assignments of to love,
Each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But with that, there's very much a clear biblical tier of your assignments. To love God, to love your neighbor as yourself. For those married, to love your spouse. That's the ranking. To love God, to love your spouse, to love the church, and to evangelize,
Yeah, spouse and the family.
Spouse and your family that you create with them, and then your family, but like extended below that. And so I think that sacrifice can't cause you to get those out of order. Sacrifice can't cause you to forsake loving Christ. Sacrifice can't cause you to forsake loving your spouse. Sacrifice can't cause you to put them out of order. Right. God, your spouse, the family you create with your spouse, and then everyone else below that. and assignments below that, jobs below that, aspirations, dreams, all of that below that. And so I think sacrifice can't cause you to mix those up.
Yeah.
Sacrifice can't also cause you to die on hills that you shouldn't die on. You know. Did you have thoughts?
Yeah, I was thinking of all the things that you were listing. Those are all commandments from God, right? Mm-hmm. Commandments. We are to love God. We are to love our spouses and families well. We are to, for guys, love our spouses to the point of laying our life down, right? And we're to love others as we love ourselves, right? I think the common thread here is what I was talking about earlier, where it's obedience, right? Like when you're choosing to sacrifice for something and it's causing you to walk in disobedience, there's the line, right? Like, is this causing you to disobey the Lord, right? What did God tell you to do, right? And sometimes it's not as clear as sin, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, if you're sacrificing for something sinful, don't do it, right? But if you're sacrificing for something that God told you not to do, even though it's not necessarily sinful, right? If God told you to do something and you're not doing it, or vice versa, if God told you not to do something and you are doing it, then there's the line. There's where sacrifice is no longer relevant, because you need to obey the Lord. You need to walk in obedience. Mm-hmm. So that's yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, sacrifice is a hard topic to talk about in today's culture. I think because
it's very me-focused culture.
Yeah,
it's very,
our culture is very
fend for yourself.
Yeah, it's very me-focused. The whole idea of sacrificing something is foreign. It's why would you choose to give something up, right? But it's what Christ did for us, right? Christ gave up his life for us. He was fully man and chose to give up his life for people that didn't love him, that didn't want him, that wanted him dead, right? And that doesn't make sense, right? And God will call you to something that sometimes doesn't make sense, right? He'll call you to sacrifice for him, to sacrifice even for other people or other relationships. But the key is obedience, right? Mm-hmm. Jesus Christ went to the cross, not just for sacrifice sake, but for obedience sake. He said, "Lord, can you take this cup from me?" He didn't want to do it, but he knew that the Lord was telling him to. Mm-hmm. So, there could be an argument that he was walking in obedience more than he was sacrifice. But sometimes they're just the one and the same.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
Don't despise moments to sacrifice, because it'll end up blessing you often more than it'll bless other people. Like the way that it refines you, the way that there's a spiritual, like very divine type of rewarding feeling that comes from it. And it's knowing that you're loving the way that Christ loved, in a small way.
Yeah. Amen. All right. Well,
amen.
There it is. Sacrifice. Do you have any other thoughts, or is that it?
Nope.
Cool.
I'm good.
All right. Well, this has been another episode of Christian Takeover. It's kind of just like me asking questions.
Christian Takeover. Yeah. Thank you for watching. And go watch the other ones if you haven't already. And more are coming.
Yep.
More are coming on all the things we talked about, all the things we almost rabbit trailed on. So, yeah, thank you for watching.
Take care, guys. Bye.